Hello, my name is Rich Kalman. I'm an Ipswich resident for the last 22 years and a practicing attorney in Ipswich for the last 25 years. I'm sitting today with Glenn Gibbs, the Director of Planning and Development for the town of Ipswich. Today we're starting a new program on Ipswich Cable. It's entitled Ipswich, What's the Plan? And the impetus for this program was really my observation that over the last 20 years or so, many of the initiatives that have dramatically changed Ipswich have come out of the planning board, and particularly under the leadership of Glenn Gibbs. But I've realized that many of those initiatives didn't come really out to the public forefront until maybe a fall town meeting or hearings for a fall town meeting. And I thought, why not have a program where there was a dialogue with Glenn Gibbs to understand and educate the residents about what initiatives maybe were even being considered. What trends, what ideas was the planning department even looking at? The idea for this program is that these topics will be timely and informative and really give residents an idea of what the planning department is thinking about for the future of Ipswich. Today's program, though, is going to be on one that's timely right now as we speak. It's in the local news, and it involves public art and the installation of public art in Ipswich. And so, Glenn, thank you for joining me today. And so my first question is...
Before you start, Richard,
yes.
I'd like to add one thing to your...
Yes.
You made a comment about the involvement of the planning department in various things that have happened over the years, and a reference to the planning board, which certainly makes sense, but I think it would be appropriate to call out many other groups that have worked on important initiatives within the context of the town and the planning office, and that includes the Open Space Committee, the Housing Partnership, and those two groups in particular, I think, were closely related to some of the other things that, as well as ad hoc committees such as the Riverwalk Committee and others. So it wasn't just the planning board, but all kinds of groups, and it wasn't just me by any means. Yep. But I certainly, as someone who's been here for a few years, have had the good fortune to be able to have been involved with a lot of things that have happened here in Ipswich.
Okay, and Glenn, I do want to thank you for that correction, and certainly my thoughts are in the programs ahead. I'm sure that many of the topics we will discuss will bring up either Open Space Committee, Affordable Housing Committee, and those groups that have played such a role that you've discussed. But today, let's discuss public art and what exactly is public art.
Well, Rich, I think a simple definition of public art would be work that's created by artists to be put into a public space and a space that's accessible to the public. Now, most traditional forms of public art are things like memorials, historical monuments, sculptures, murals, mosaics. More recently, though, the whole concept of public art has expanded to include things like sound and light installations and even performance events.
And so why do you think public art is important to a community?
Well, it's been well demonstrated that public art can be beneficial to a community in a variety of ways, both culturally, socially, and economically. And from sort of a cultural and social respect, public art can help to humanize the built environment. The built environment is just a fancy way of saying the buildings and streets and so forth around us. By invigorating public spaces, by giving communities a greater sense of place and of identity, and it can help us to activate a good piece of public art, whether it's a sculpture or a mural or whatever it might be, can activate our imaginations. And it also, good public art can encourage us to pay more attention to our surrounding environment. There's also an abundance of evidence that public art can generate significant revenue for communities through the expenditures of visitors who are drawn to come and see that art, to the tax revenues generated by businesses that may benefit and thus benefit from public art and then expand and create additional tax revenues. So for all these reasons, public art can be found in communities around the globe. And I believe now the viewers will be seeing some slides of some sculptures that have been placed in various communities around the world. And as they flash through your screen, you'll see that there are many that are humorous. There are those that are serious, thought-provoking, controversial, inspiring, and even beautiful. So there is a whole range, and these slides just show public sculpture, which is just, as I mentioned earlier, just one form of public art that a community might consider.
And so, is public art coming to Ipswich?
Well, yes, it is. And it turns out that it may be coming in a couple of different ways. It started last year when a proposal came in from a citizen, Rick Silverman, who approached the town with the idea of funding a public sculpture on town land.
And now, we don't have any policy for accepting public art. So what was done when Rick Silverman made this proposal?
That's a good question. Because we did not have a policy, the town manager asked the planning office to draft a policy that could then be given to the Board of Selectmen for them to consider and review and then ultimately adopt, which they could then use when they considered proposals for public art, such as the one that Mr. Silverman has put forth.
And so, how did you go about, creating this policy? Was there a model that was used?
Yes, one of the things that we do when we're trying to create policy is to look around to see what other communities have done to address the issue that we're interested in addressing as well. Our search led us to the town of Brookline, which had recently adopted a public art policy in which we believed contained many of the components that made sense to us. And so we used the Brookline bylaw as a model, and then we retrofitted it to meet the specific interests of Ipswich.
And so, can you just, briefly describe some of the components in that policy?
Sure. It basically establishes standards and procedures for both the selection, the installation, and the maintenance of public art on public property, town-owned land, which can be within the right-of-way of a street, could be also in a public park is another example. So the policy also includes a mechanism for the public to become involved and to participate in the selection process. And it establishes a public art review committee to review any proposal that comes in and make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen so that they can use that information when they conduct their own review and consideration and then ultimate decision on a proposal for public art.
And so that committee now is in place?
Yes, it is.
And who are the members of that
Well,
committee?
The policy states that the committee shall contain certain members of the community. One member of the Ipswich Cultural Commission, who I believe is Christina Brendel. One member of the town's Shade and Beautification Committee, which is Paula Jones. Two members of the Art Committee, Art Community, one of whom is Barbara Monahan, and the other is Katie McElwain. The Superintendent of Cemetery and Parks, who's Doug Puter, and myself, the Planning Director. We also have John Fisk, who's the Chairman of the Ipswich Historical Commission, as a member as well.
Now, if residents wanted to go and really read the policy and understand it thoroughly, is it on the town website?
Yes, that information, the policy, as well as the recommendations that the committee have made to date to the selectmen are also on the website.
So where does the Silverman proposal stand right now?
Well, the committee met twice last fall. First with Mr. Silverman to discuss his proposal, and then second met with his sculptor. Was a good location for it to be erected. That preliminary report was sent out for, as required by the policy, sent out to the abutters for comment, as well as to other persons within the town, the police chief, the DPW director and others that would be in a position to add some valuable comment. And so after that process happened, the committee met again and made some adjustments to the proposal, confirmed them, got the support of the donor for some of those changes. And then the committee produced a final report and sent it up to the Board of Selectmen.
And so has there been a hearing before the Board of Selectmen?
Yes, the Board of Selectmen held a hearing in the spring to consider this matter. There were persons who spoke in support. There were persons who spoke in opposition, primarily, again, based on, not on the sculpture itself, which was almost uniformly been praised as an attractive sculpture, but concern about whether or not the proposed location was appropriate.
And so, having had that one hearing, where does it go from here?
Well, the selectmen, after the hearing was over, asked if a site visit could be held, that the selectmen would attend, as well as members of the Public Art Review Committee and other interested parties. Subsequent to that request, the town manager requested the Public Art Review Committee to do a review of possible other locations for the sculpture. Now, at the meeting, Rick Silverman was asked by the selectmen if he was willing to consider other locations. His indication was that he was interested in the current location and could not commit to another location, but nonetheless, in subsequent conversations, he's indicated he hasn't ruled out the possibility of another location, even though he would like to see it on the green. So with that, the committee will be reviewing shortly and reporting back to the selectmen some other possible sites for this proposed donation of the sculpture.
So residents from here forward can follow any developments on this by, there'll be either, will a committee meeting be a meeting that the public can attend?
Yes, it's a public meeting. It's not necessarily held in the evening, so it may not be a meeting that everyone can attend, but it is held as a public meeting and people can come to that if they
Okay.
wish.
And then there will be then a subsequent hearing before the Board of Selectmen to report back on ideas of other locations potentially.
That's right. And again, the Public Art Review Committee is simply an advisory group that all decision-making is in the hands of the selectmen.
Okay. Well, Glenn, thank you. That's something that, as I mentioned at the start, has put public art right in the forefront right now, and hopefully residents will follow that in upcoming meetings of the selectmen. But there's also a public art display, quite exciting, that's going on right now as this program is airing.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit about this public art display?
Sure. I think it was a little bit of serendipity that this came about because it had no connection whatsoever to the Silverman proposal. But earlier in the spring, the town was approached by Thaddeus Sadowski, who I believe attended Ipswich High and was a recent graduate of MOCA, Mass something or other. Is it MOCA? No, actually it was a MOCA grant that he received, but it was from, I think, the Mass School of Public Art, I believe is where he graduated from. And he was a recipient, along with several other students, of a $5,000 grant to undertake a project, and his project was to hold an installation, and he has created a nonprofit group, and his first installation is happening right here in Ipswich.
And so I understand there might be as many as a dozen sculptures that are on display right now?
Right, as of this moment while we're talking, or unless some more came in today, there were 6 installed over this past weekend, the weekend of the 27th, and I believe there may be up to 6 more, so a maximum of 12 sculptures altogether that are being installed temporarily at several locations in the town center, There's let's see, a couple now, I believe, at the South Green, and then there's one at the Ipswich Museum. There's a couple at what we call Memorial Green near the Visitor Center and the Old Town Hall, and a sculpture on the bridge, pedestrian bridge of the Riverwalk. Those are the ones I saw yesterday, but there may well be several more now. The plan was to have some additional ones put in by today or tomorrow.
And so hopefully, actually, as we've been talking about this, there might have been some slides of those
Yes.
art pieces that have now been shown to the audience while we've been discussing them.
That's right. We've showed the slides of the artwork that's either been installed or is about to be installed, and the art will be here in town for about 6 weeks. I'm losing track of the exact date, but sometime in I think fairly early August, the sculptures will come down. But they will be in for that time and available for public viewing.
And this art was all approved by the Board of Selectmen.
Correct.
As far as the type of sculptures and their location?
Right. They also executed an agreement between the town and the Mr. Sadowski, which included such things as addressing the issue of liability and maintenance and repair of town property if any damage was done during the installation. All those things were addressed to the satisfaction of the department heads and the Board of Selectmen.
And so I'm just going to ask you, is there anything else that's going to be going on now that would help promote these art exhibitions at the same time?
Yes, there is. On Friday, July 10th, there will be a reception from 3 to 6 p.m. that will be held down by the Alexander Knight House, which is the old house that was constructed using material equipment of the era, that's back from the 1600s or 1700s, I guess. And at that location, there will be a leather craft and a forging demonstration for folks who come down will be able to see that.
And is there an art walk as well?
Yes, there's also an art walk that's going on. In fact, here's the little brochure that is going to be of things that are happening that same day. This artwork is going to feature the work of Suzanne Crocker, Kate Griswold, who's a photographer, and Julia Purinton, who's another artist. Julia Purinton's art showing at the Hall Haskell House. Susan Crocker's art is showing at 39 South Main Street, and Kate Griswold's photography is also showing at the Hall Haskell Gallery. So that art gallery will be going on, and then later that evening, after dark, there will be a projection on a screen that will be set up at the rear of the building on South Main Street, being projected from the patio of the Riverwalk, and that will include pictures of all of the artwork that's been shown by the mentioned artists, and also as well as the sculptures that are installed currently.
So, I mean, I think this is exciting. Make really a Friday night of art appreciation. When it's all said and done, is there going to be some way for the planning department or the recreation department to determine if this event was successful?
Yes, one of the ways that we've been doing this, that Kerry Bates and the Art and Recreational Department has been doing for the events that it's been holding, such as Downtown Tuesdays, is the use of Facebook feeds, and that's proven to be a really useful and beneficial way of learning what the people thought, and so that's going to be one of our primary resources for getting information on whether people thought it was a worthwhile event, something they may want to see in the future.
Yeah, and I guess obviously that would be contingent upon whether this organization that put together this demonstration would be willing to do it again, maybe on a more regular, on a regular annual basis.
Right, and I think it's too early for Mr. Sadowski to make any kind of commitment upon that, but certainly if it's a very successful installation, then that would seem to improve our chances of perhaps it happening again. There are examples of other places in the North Shore where temporary art installations are done on an annual basis. One of them being Moseley Park in Newburyport. They have one, I believe, each year. I've seen it. I saw it once, and it's a very interesting walk. And they essentially do what we've done here.
Okay. Well, and certainly what comes to mind is, to me, is the growth of the lighting of the Ipswich River that's been occurring every fall, which certainly started as a rather small event, I don't know, in the last 5 years, but has grown each year to be quite something that people look forward to.
And all of those things really fall under the realm of public art. Lighting, the performance, the plays that have been done about the house that's been moved to the Smithsonian. That's public art. The illuminations night with the burning fires in the river, public art. So all of that really is what we're talking about today.
And so this is just the growth of a new area of public art to Ipswich, one that is temporary in nature, and then we've also discussed one that's pending that would be of a permanent variety.
Nature, correct.
Well, Glenn, I just want to thank you for taking the time to discussing those 2 points. Hopefully the residents watching this program will follow the developments with the Rick Silverman proposal, as well as hopefully go out and enjoy themselves on the night of July 10th and as many other nights as it were days as they'd like to watch the art or to view the art that'll be on display for the next several weeks. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you for this. In closing, I would just like to say to the audience at home, this topic was chosen for the first presentation or the first of this program because it was so topical. There is an idea for the next program that I would like to discuss with Glenn, which is that there have been some structural changes, some organizational changes in the planning department. As residents may know, we now have a senior planner that has taken on some of the day-to-day activities, which supposedly will free Glenn up to look at really some long-term economic developments. And at the next program, I'd really like to discuss with Glenn, what those changes have been at the organizational level and what we can look forward to maybe coming from Glenn, in the long-term economic development. And so I thank you all for watching today, and until our next program, be well and be engaged. Thank you.